again inside Paradigm Shift London. London, say hello to the internet. Hi, internet. All right, so today's meeting was a little bit extra special and also very, very cathartic, very deep, definitely peeling back some layers of the emotional and metaphysical onion. And today's conversation, we were talking a lot about personal suffering, personal fears that some of us have. And the question that we're going to go with around the circle is, how does suffering help us grow? So again, just reminding you, of course, this is a Paradigm Shift community. You can start these where you are. Check out the main website at paradigmshiftcentral.com. And I believe Anthony is going to start us off. So go ahead, dude.
I got this quote from the Bible. It was in Corinthians, and it also relates to a quote by the psychoanalyst Viktor Frankl. He once said, through suffering, perseverance through suffering builds character through meaning. And that's what I have for you.
Nice. Cool. All right. Eric?
In all of the suffering that I've gone through, I've learned, in my opinion, that suffering is just one of the things on the whole spectrum of being a human being. And so just like you have to breathe, sometimes, not all the time, thankfully, you don't have to suffer. So it's just being aware of the suffering, just as plain as a night or day, can help you just be aware of who you are as a person, and helps you grow just by labeling it.
Nice.
Pass.
Pass, okay.
Well, earlier at the start of this meeting, we talked about the hero's journey and the idea that the hero's journey entails a degree of suffering, like going into the underworld or whatever. But I think when you take that into account, it can help you become a stronger person, a more empathetic person. It can add something to you years from now that you'll look back on and, bizarrely enough, be thankful for, because it helps shape who you will end up becoming. And that's, in a way, it's invaluable because it's part of how we live.
Nice. Cool. Sarah?
Yeah, they say that life is like a roller coaster. You have your ups and downs, but I think that without the downs, the ups don't mean anything at all. And so I think that the suffering is as important, if not more important, because this doesn't mean anything without all of it.
Nice. Cool. Justin?
It's not a mistake if you learn your lesson. I think that suffering is only when you repeat the same mistake over and over. That's all.
Cool.
The greatest suffering that I experienced in my life led to the greatest gift, because I honored myself by looking for the truth in the suffering. And the gift, upon reflection, I can tell you, was that now I'm completely responsible for myself, because looking over my shoulder at the suffering to see what happened so that I wouldn't repeat it, I came to realize that I created it or co-created it, and in the realization of that, I was able to take responsibility for myself, and that is freedom.
Nice. Cool.
Pass.
Okay, pass. Lee?
Suffering for me is related to kind of getting a glimpse of what to avoid. First, it will be bad, and you have a perspective of separation, but then you can kind of pick your direction and have something to stick to for yourself.
Emily?
Oh man, suffering, I think a lot can be said about it, and I think everyone knows how it feels, and that's something that everyone should remember, that even if it feels completely overwhelming and it feels like you're the only one in the universe that must feel this, just remember that everyone has something that is suffering, and everyone experiences it. And I think suffering is something, instead of trying to solve what it is or how to get away from it, just kind of appreciate that everyone has that layer, and then as we come together, then it'll be easier to kind of rise above it.
Nice.
So I've been pondering what I was going to say, but I think that to be human or even an animal, there has to be some level of suffering. And I think once you accept that, it's easier to let it pass. Personally, I like to accept it, and that works for me.
So I broke it down as easy as possible. Suffering connects people. It drives moral action and ultimately builds character. Whatever you're suffering through right now, you'll get over it. And the thing that comes out, it's going to be freaking greater than you ever imagined.
Nice button, man.
Thanks, man.
Hey, wait, okay, so my opinion on suffering is that to be human, people, they naturally suffer, but it's also a way of finding inner peace amongst yourself.
Nice. Cool. Lane.
Oh boy. Good evening. This isn't my usual forte.
Yes.
Usually it's all sugar plum fairies and dance parties. Anyway, fear and suffering. I think that struggle and fear and suffering is almost the path to transmutation and evolution in a way, because nobody likes to do it. Nobody would choose to go through it willingly, unless you're a masochist or just into that sort of thing. But I think that with my suffering especially, it's taught me a lot, and to put it very simply, any strength that I've gathered or reaped or stolen from the world is only because I know how to be weak. And I think you only know how to be compassionate, you only know how to be loving and caring if you have suffered. And similar to what some other people have said, I think that's how you cultivate empathy, because you really have two choices when you suffer, and not to be so, only a Sith deals in absolutes, but not to be so black and white, but I think you have two choices. And again, sometimes I fluctuate between the extremes, but when you feel pain or suffering or agony or any of that, you can say, well, don't you know who I am? You're never gonna beat me. You're never gonna stop me. And no matter how much suffering you give me, I'm gonna visit so much suffering on the world that they're never gonna forget me, and no one will ever, ever, ever beat me. But this way, I think, is detrimental, because in that sense, you're perpetuating the suffering, and you become the suffering, and then you're a vehicle for suffering. I think the higher way, or the more enlightened way, is to transmute that suffering. And because you know what suffering feels like, you know, as everyone is yourself, that you don't want to put other people through that pain and the suffering, because you know that there's good in them and they don't deserve it. So I think that's partly what suffering teaches you. It allows you to be a better person, and it allows you to appreciate the joy and happiness and the truth and the peace and all that fun, loving, fluffy bunny stuff that we like to talk about and want to try and materialize. And I don't think we'd have that drive so strongly if none of us had ever suffered. So that's it.
Wise words.
All right, so suffering is just a stepping stone. Even though as a spoiled ass child, suffering is what makes you progress in life. Just like a video game, every single level of Mario is harder and harder. It's just a level of progress. And it's hard. As a Virgo, you think everything is perfect. You're like, oh, you got to make this shit happen. But you get to like the 4th level of Mario, and you're like, damn. And the last level of Mario was messed up, because you got to actually Google the actual results. Anyway, so I'm saying sorry I got off topic. I'm just saying that suffering is part of life. All the souls here right now on earth, they chose to be here. That's really Palladian kind of a thing to say. And that guy right there. Anyway, so suffering is life on earth.
Nice. Right on, man. Ben, what do you got?
Suffering is optional. I choose to live through it, to learn through it, to appreciate love out of it. Appreciate the dark, and you'll appreciate the light. That's simply my view.
Nice. Right on. Yeah, so just some final thoughts of my own. Actually, I was going to say something similar to what Ben just said, the idea, or at least the question, is suffering optional? I think when we're sort of going through it at the time, suffering is also an attitude that we have within an environment, within a situation. When you can sort of get down or get up to that higher perspective that everything in our life is part of our higher growth, is it possible to go through a scenario and not suffer as much as we might have suffered previously before we were as mature, spiritually mature, emotionally mature, psychologically mature. So I mean, suffering is also like sort of a subjective thing. Suffering to one person might not be suffering to another person. So it really is this idea that understanding, yes, suffering is the universe putting the dirt on top of the seed that causes the seed to grow even stronger by pushing up through the dirt and reaching up towards the light, because the light is always there. Everything is always light. Everything is always love. And regardless of how distraught or how chaotic it might seem at the time, it is definitely something that as a higher collective consciousness is helping us become more of who we are. And definitely I like what Lane says, that it's helping us become more empathetic. So when we realize that suffering is part of the experience, it allows us to be empathetic of it and to work towards creating an environment where we can suffer less. And I think that's something that we can sort of understand and realize, is that suffering is not an enjoyable thing. Therefore, let's create a world where there is less of it. And the way how we do that is, just by, talking about it, having these conversations about it, continuing to mature ourselves about it. And that's really all I have to say. But obviously there's a lot more that we can talk, but we encourage you to continue the conversations where you are. So please leave your comments below as to how suffering helps you grow or helps us grow in some way or another. So again, thank you so much for listening. It's a stepping stone. This is all a stepping stone. We're leveling up, getting towards that castle. Gonna save the princess, that's right. So thanks to everybody here. Check out ParadigmShiftCentral.com. Listen to Paradigm Shift Radio. Say goodbye to the internet. Alright, until next time, peace and love. Cheers. One love. Alright, let's go get some shawarma.